On October 8, 2018, Hurricane Michael underwent a 48-hour rapid intensification period where it went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 4 hurricane. By landfall on October 10, 2018 at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, Hurricane Michael was an unprecedented for the region Category 5 hurricane, making landfall near Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. Hurricane Michael was the strongest hurricane in recorded history to make landfall on the Florida Panhandle. Landing with sustained winds of 161 miles per hour and a minimum pressure of 919 millibars, the storm was the fourth most powerful hurricane to hit the United States, spreading devastation far inland through many counties in northwestern Florida, from Bay County, Gulf County, Calhoun County, even through Jackson County and Leon County, where the state capital is located. Hurricane Michael was unique in that it maintained its major hurricane status all the way through the Florida-Georgia state line. As it entered Seminole County, Georgia, it was still a strong Category 3 hurricane. Across northwestern Florida and into the state of Georgia, Hurricane Michael was responsible for $25 billion in damages. These are the 31 voices of Hurricane Michael, representing the many unique experiences and perspectives of the community members who endured the storm and its impacts. Voices of hope, empathy, pain, lessons learned, grit, determination, and extensive insight into one of the most catastrophic hurricane seasons the Florida Panhandle has ever encountered. I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, and allow me to introduce you to
welcome to another edition of Hurricane Michael's Voice with a few more voices of the project. I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, and today we're speaking with Mr. Adrian and Betsie Welle. Thank you so much for coming out today, sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I like to dig right into your backstory pre-storm. There's more to the storm than just the storm. How was Mexico Beach home to you two prior to landfall on October 10th, 2018 of Hurricane Michael?
You can go.
So how did we get here? I grew up in Pensacola. I met Adrian, and in order to get to Florida, he interviewed for jobs in city government and was hired as a city clerk in 2013. So before the storm, we'd been married almost 2 years. He'd been living here 5 years, and we were both volunteers on the fire department. I was a victim advocate, and he was city clerk for the city of Mexico Beach. And we were both real estate agents, and I was supposed to start
teaching.
Yeah, I was starting to teach and learn as kind of a student teacher or aide at a Montessori school.
So you guys were wearing multiple hats.
Oh, yeah.
A lot here.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and that summer I had bartended at Castaway's restaurant, and Adrian was security guard here at Paradise Shores.
And an Uber driver.
And an Uber driver.
So
Lots of stuff going on.
Everything it takes for the community to tick. You guys were just rocking almost all those fronts.
Oh, yeah.
So you're doing you have multiple responsibilities in Mexico Beach leading up to the storm in 2018. That summer, how are you feeling? Are you thinking hurricanes? Are you prepared?
At the city, we were always thinking hurricanes. I mean, every time there's a spot, since I moved here, the joke with me was always, I want to experience a hurricane. I never said a big hurricane. I said just a small hurricane. And I had been working at the city long enough that my office was pretty well on autopilot. Life was good. Everything was moving along smooth. We'd watch something come up, just pay attention, prepare for it if a storm was coming, and never anything ever happened. But this one we actually prepared more for, because I think we knew we were getting different reports than were shown on TV. We were probably 2 days ahead, and I'm a bit of a weather freak, so I was watching the storm from Friday as a point of interest on the NOAA website. Nobody talked about the possible tropical storm until Sunday. And I'm thinking, well, I've already been watching this since Friday, and on Sunday they were already saying it could be a Category 3.
Yeah, when Adrian first moved to Florida, he became fascinated by hurricanes and had actually met a couple times and gone over to Harris County, Mississippi, which was where the eye of Katrina hit, and had met with them and talked about options for funding, because his goal was to build a centralized kind of emergency command center in Mexico Beach where police, fire, and city hall would all be together, and that would be storm-proof.
There's no shelter here.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mr. Rupert from Harris County was, explained to us that you don't get any funding.
Until you get a storm.
Yes, you won't get any funding for a project like that until you have a storm.
So there's no in existence currently pre-funding for preventative or preparation for an event like this.
There is, but after 10 years from a major storm hitting the state of Florida, that pot got pretty empty and stopped getting money. Because it goes by risk, and Florida hasn't had a storm in 10 years, so.
Yeah.
He said once the storm hits your state, not necessarily here, apply, because you'll have some money come in for prevention. And he's the emergency manager for Harrison County.
And was the emergency manager at the time of Katrina.
He was there at the time of Katrina. I learned a lot, and that's why I was probably the most prepared.
Yeah, and he connected you with websites to watch for good storm tracking, and he gave you books and stuff like that, of course.
It sounds like you're an absolute asset to be on.
Well, that's why I make the comment that I had different information than was being shown on TV. I was watching different things.
Yeah. Of course, unfortunately, nothing really prepares you for how bad it's going to be or could be until you actually live through it.
On the personal front, you're thinking on your city's front, watching this storm, doing what you can to communicate that with your cohorts and getting ready. What are you doing personally? Were you guys feeling ready in your personal home front? How are you?
So Monday I went to the Montessori school, and it was midday there that evacuation started being ordered. So school was canceled until Thursday. We thought we'd come back on Thursday. And that school was in Apalachicola. And so I came home, and so I knew I had most of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning to prepare. At that point, it still wasn't, it was like a Category 1, something like that. And every time there's a storm, so we had, the year previous, Irma was so unpredictable that people were preparing up here for that. Mm-hmm. They had prepared for a couple other ones, Nate as well, that had gone.
Hermine.
And then Hermine had gone through Appalach to Tallahassee. So, we'd been on high alert before. And there's just this odd feeling where it's, everyone's off work, everyone's off school, and so there's all this traffic and stuff, but it's an eerie quietness because there is that calm before the storm. Like, I remember the day before Irma hit Florida, I was out paddleboarding. That's a whole nother story, but it was the calmest, most beautiful day ever, and it's just so eerie. Like, you can feel this energy in the air, and you see everyone running in errands and things like that. And I don't know how to explain it. It's just a very odd feeling, and it's just, you kind of know, and yeah, it's very, very, so that was...
I think it's a good way. It's probably, I agree, something hard to put into words, but I think you did really good, Charlie. Yeah.
Thanks. So that was Monday and Tuesday, and we talked
about leaving Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, because Monday is a Category 1. He's supposed to stay as a city worker until a Category 3. So Tuesday it got to be predicted to be a Category 3, and by the afternoon, so we really seriously sat down and talked, are we going to leave or stay? we're young, we're physically fit, we're volunteers on the fire department. We had no children.
We had a safe place to stay.
We had an offer of a safe place to stay, which we agreed to, which at the time we didn't realize it, but it was built to withstand 200-mile-per-hour winds. It was inland about a half mile, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is. And yeah, so it was a pretty easy decision for us.
We still saw storm surge from where we were.
So you stayed.
Yes, so we stayed, and so Tuesday, when they were,
Tuesday night.
They were evacuating all of the fire and police and whatnot. We took the fire truck and the rapid response vehicle to where we were staying because it was a wide open field. There were no trees or anything to hit it.
Because we didn't think it would survive in the fire hall here. And it obviously would not have.
Yeah.
But it was, when we really had a serious conversation of leaving was about 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, the news changed
We went to
sometime
bed.
between 10 o'clock and 2 a.m. And I was asleep already. Adrian woke me up and said, it's predicted to be a 5. Like late Tuesday, it had risen to a 4 and then a 5. And so he said, Betsy, are we going to leave? And I said, it's too late.
Now.
You could already feel the wind picking up. We were positioned, and at that point, we had the discussion with the homeowners that the house was built to withstand 200-mile-per-hour winds. We knew that the rebar went all the way from the roof down into the foundation. And I said, no, we're here. We're better off just to stay. We made a commitment. All our family knows, this was...
Getting on the highway at that point could have been a more dangerous option.
Exactly.
And a lot of the, even just being stuck on the highway, even if you can make it to hotels up north, a lot of the hotels are all booked.
Even
and
if you
taken.
could make it get fuel.
There was a lot of people, driving 8 hours north and hotels were booked, trying to get out of the area. So it was a smart move. Scary, but smart move at that point.
Well, at that point, I wasn't really scared either. We had talked about the house. We had talked about, yeah.
You're about to experience your hurricane. You had the drills before then. You'd experienced the different hurricanes that were kind of coming around like Hermine. And did you feel like you'd experienced a hurricane by this point?
No,
or
because they never were here.
So you're considering this is your experience.
Yeah, this was the first one for me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Goodness.
this is the first time we had police going up and down streets on megaphones telling people to evacuate. This is the first time we knocked every door in town to tell people to get out.
Yeah, so Tuesday morning, again, the evacuation was upgraded. All of Mexico Beach was mandatory evacuation. So they did. The police made these signs and put them up on the roads that said mandatory evacuation. They drove up and down streets on the loudspeaker and told people, please leave. And then as the police and fire all split up town and we started knocking doors. And, we did the thing, okay, who's your next of kin? Who should we notify? Something happens to you. And here's a Sharpie, please write your social security number on your arm. So we knocked.
To convince people at that point that maybe they should go. But
Did you run into much pushback on that front? Was that something you experienced as trying to encourage an entire community to evacuate?
We got really angry at one house.
Yeah, they're lucky to be alive.
4 people, 6 people.
3 adults, 2 children.
Yeah.
Did not want to evacuate.
Yeah, with kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing that the
special
meteorology
needs.
community struggles with is communicating when you really need to leave. I cannot imagine being the face of the evacuation saying, hey, eye to eye, you need to leave. And then you get that correspondence right then and there, that pushback, and have to navigate that.
We paid for this place, we're on vacation, we're not leaving. Every house around them is gone, except for that one.
Goodness. Well, that was a very fortunate turnout for them.
And he saw us on the
thankfully.
beach and said, told you we'd be okay.
I wanted to punch him.
Oh, it was.
Because they had a special needs child, diabetic adult. It's
just why put the risk there when there's going to be no supply here? And then they left that day.
Goodness.
I don't know how they left because there was no
Their
vehicles.
vehicles were destroyed, so.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the house directly in front of them was one of our 4
Yeah,
fatalities.
so there was one gentleman who was concrete block house right on the beach. Tried to convince him. We actually sent the police to the house next door, which is the one with the children, to see if that would qualify for child endangerment. But said, unfortunately, there's nothing that they could do. So thankfully, they survived, but the gentleman in front did not.
But I thought he would leave.
That's so unfortunate.
You didn't know what he was going to do. He kept telling us.
Yeah, and a lot of people, like the gentleman there at the first house, he said, I made it through Opal. I've been through Category 3. That wasn't really that bad. We're going to be fine. In fact, we had friends who, same thing, they're local. They lived through Opal. They said, oh, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. They called us Tuesday night and said, we're leaving.
Everybody left.
Leave. And they told us to leave. And then we started calling other people too, trying to convince them to leave.
Yeah, it was probably 8, 9 o'clock that night. Everybody started to
Tuesday
text
night.
message or call and say, get out.
Yeah.
We're leaving. And I said, you were all the people that encouraged me to stay.
So Tuesday, after we went door to door, we had a list, and it was about 300 and some people that said they were staying, where we had their addresses and names and all that written down and their emergency contact. Thankfully, a lot of those people left. I mean, we think there probably was about that many, but we didn't have everybody on our list because it
I'd
was
say half that list
catching
left.
people at home was
that
hit or miss. But
Well, it sounds like you guys did your very best and got through to quite a few people when it came down to it.
There's the whole crew.
yeah, I think it was a very
Everybody's
good
here.
response from everybody because, at the time, again, you never know how bad it's going to be. But thankfully, someone was listening and did the prep work
Our pre-storm execution was fantastic.
So, yeah, the Wednesday morning then, so we're staying at our friend's house. About 10 o'clock, chief of police was in town and called Adrian and said, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going back home. The wind's really picking up because he lives in Panama City. Let's meet back here at 3 o'clock
We're meeting
this
at the
afternoon.
mayor's at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock at the mayor's. In hindsight, we get the irony.
We were there.
And the people we were staying with got a phone call from someone from their church that they were starting to get scared. It was a Spanish-speaking family that lived just a little bit off the intercoastal and didn't have anywhere else to go and were starting to get scared. So we left in the big truck. The guys are too scared to go with us.
It's 11:30 in the morning and this thing's about to come ashore.
Yeah, no, the two of us ladies went and picked up the family I went with because I speak Spanish to tell them what to do and what to bring. And the trees were swaying. And on the way there, we were fine, but on the way back, trees had started to fall. So we made it underneath all the power lines. That was the only thing I was worried about. But it was only a little bit after we got back that the power went out. So I had turned my phone off Tuesday night because I knew we would lose power and I wanted to save battery for when I knew I could charge it again. So I told my family. My family lives in Florida. They understand hurricanes. I told them, yeah, we'll talk to you Thursday or so. Adrian, on the other hand, his family lives in Minnesota, has never been through a hurricane or understood
But I warned him.
about hurricanes. So he was taking videos out the window.
You weren't the only one.
And I warned him that I might lose cell phone service at some point.
But the videos got pretty dramatic.
The last video was at 12:28, and I think we lost service at 12:29.
Are you posting videos or are you running Facebook
I was
Live?
I was sending them to my,
Oh, we're sending them.
sending them direct.
Oh, goodness. I cannot imagine getting that.
I did do a Facebook Live.
Yeah, getting that information and then the radio silence must have been scary for them, for sure.
Nah.
So his family got nervous. Yeah, so the actual storm.
Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Deering.
During?
So again, the house we were staying at, very well built, had really thick glass windows looking out to the pool deck. And that's where we sat and watched it. And it was incredible to actually be able to watch the storm happening. I mean, at a certain point,
Can't watch
it
anything.
sounded, we live by the Air Force Base, so we hear jets all the time. And I swear, from noon on, I was like, why are there jets flying? And I didn't realize that was actually the sound of the storm. It sounded like a jet when it's going overhead. And I don't know if that was strictly the wind or the wind through, there's a cell phone tower there, if it was the wind through the cables. But it was so loud, like they were flying right overhead and just nonstop.
The shingles. That's mine.
So, and after 11:30, 12 o'clock, it was total whiteout. Like you could not see past the edge of the house because it was raining sideways. All you could see was what was in that pool area, the roof slowly coming off, the screens tearing out.
Watching the big, huge planter slowly slide across the patio and then drop into the pool.
Yeah. And the sound, they had these big clay roof shingles, tiles, and the wind somehow got under it and would break them off. And you would hear them, it sounded like reindeer. It would be thug, 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 as they fell off the house. And come through, in the pool deck, it would come through the screen,
like
break the
darts
screen, and fall into the pool.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah. So I don't know about what time it was we moved to the closet, because again, the owners had built the house, so they knew what was the strongest point. The hallway and the closet was solid wood because it was a domed roof, so it was a solid wood location. They felt that was the safest. So there were about 12 of us, went into 2 closets, and yeah, the air conditioning was out. It was starting to get a little warm, sticky. We're all sitting in the dark in the closet, and Bubba got his guitar, and we started singing gospel hymns. And it was just to keep everyone calm.
And it really didn't last that long.
It was probably
an hour.
Yeah, I would say no more than an hour. We were in the closet, and we started to come out and
I've
kind
heard
of make
the
our way around.
singing songs narrative a few times of helping people stay calm. I haven't got to speak to someone that did that though yet, so I'm really glad you brought that to the table. Thank you.
Yeah, we did. Even when we came out of the closet, we sang for a little bit while.
In the little sitting area.
It was just good to keep everyone, not thinking about what was going on. At no point did I feel unsafe, except for the door. The home had this huge double doors, and the only latch was one on the bottom and then the door handle. And it was on the side of the house where the wind was hitting directly. So it was moving significantly. And again, you always hear, once something gives, that just, it brings the wind into the house. It can take the rest of the windows or possibly the roof off. So again, in that house, I don't think the roof would have come off, but still, we didn't need the wind coming into the house.
Still made you nervous watching that.
Yes, so I leaned against the door, which again, they say not to do. I leaned against the door, got a couple other people to come push on it, hold on it until we figured out a solution. We found a love seat that fit perfectly. It hit against because there was a little entryway, there were 2 pillars there. It pressed against between the pillars and the door and held it solid. So it was perfect. And so it held it, and we were at least confident there. That was the only really weak spot in the house.
Except for when we opened the garage door and blew in the garage door.
Yeah, so that was after the storm was going through. People were getting more comfortable, starting to wander out. They wanted to see the wind, so someone opened the garage door, and that release of pressure forced the big garage door in on top of the cars.
Being volunteer firefighters then, as the storm passed over, what's your next move at this point?
Yes.
You stayed for this very reason, and now here you are.
We have a 4:00 meeting.
That was our goal. So about 3, it was starting to wind down. You could see and stuff. And
there were 5 of us in that rescue truck because everybody wanted to ride with to see what town looked like.
So finally, I think it was about 4. Was it 4 o'clock?
4:15.
4:15. We decided it was safe enough to come out. And that's when I realized, when I walked out of the house and realized there was no tree standing that was bigger than 6 inches across. That's when I knew how bad it really was. Because in that house, the damage wasn't that bad. It was hard to really tell what had happened.
I didn't realize how bad it was till we turned on 15th Street.
Yeah. So tell us about the drive into town.
Oh, the drive into town. There were 5 of us. We took 15th Street, couldn't go any further, turned around.
Why couldn't we go any further?
Because there's debris everywhere. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell the story. People weren't there. You had to describe
I'm
it to them.
wondering if I'm not telling it correctly. Then we went up to 98. Actually, we stopped at the mayor's first, didn't we? No. Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, go check out, you can drive 98 and see. So we drove down 98 to Paradise Shores. That's as far as we got.
Wow. To the remains of toucans.
Yeah,
that were
toucans was all over the road. That's what stopped us. Turned around. Trying to get out on a radio was our struggle. We got out right on the radio right here. We got out on the radio at their house.
Underneath the cell phone tower.
Underneath the cell phone tower. And then we turned around, we were gonna go see if our house was okay in the truck. And then halfway there, I had a flat tire. And we messed up trying to plug that. So we turned around, drove on the rim, and by the time we got to the mayor's house, we had 2 flat tires. And we just parked in the street. Got a ride back to where we were staying, got the fire truck. Took the fire truck back to town.
Well, we tried going north first to try and get
north.
some machinery because we needed something to clear the roads. There were so many power poles and trees and lines and debris that you couldn't drive. We needed.
But we couldn't go up the road because there's a power line that would have hooked my light bar.
But eventually, some kind of excavator did come down
From
from
somewhere.
Overstreet.
I don't know where they came from. And then we turned around, got up 386 again, and then an excavator is behind me and comes up to me, and it's a friend of ours that lives in town. And I said, where'd you get that? He goes, don't worry about it. And I said, how'd you get it started? He goes, I hot wired it. I got it under control. He goes, we got a lady in a house. We need to move. I need some help. So we turned around, went over there. They were done by the time we got there.
So he had cleared 15th Street with the excavator
so he
that
took
had.
the excavator and drove in front of us and cleared the road. And then we got to 15th Street in 98. Saw the motel, and there was a house that we were told people had stayed in that was now on the other side of the road. So we went into that house to see it, and they weren't there. Turns out they moved to the condo on the other end of town.
Thank goodness.
And then the fire.
Well, yeah, while we parked the truck at the end of 15th and 98 because there was just, again, so much stuff there. And you could hear gas leaking. You could see the broken gas pipe. And so we said, everyone be super careful because all it takes is one spark. We walked down, we checked on the houses because, the people we were staying with knew the owners of the houses and had talked to them on Tuesday. So they said they were staying there. So, again, so many of the houses were just disintegrated, but those 2 were brand new and they had literally just been pushed across the street into the condo building. And we called and yelled, and if someone had been in there, I think they would have been okay as long as they hadn't hit their head because the way it just kind of, floated over, and granted when it hit the condo building, they could have hurt themselves, but we felt pretty confident at that point that no one was there. There were people in other places, like the gentleman
in the
who stayed in the
motel.
motel. There was another house with people in it that would have been totally almost totally underwater.
The man in the motel who all of a sudden said, I had to get to the 2nd floor. I was underwater. He still looked in shock when we saw him.
It was everyone, at about 5 o'clock as we're driving around these different places, people started to come out of the woodwork. And everyone was just white as a sheet, from the shock, from the trauma, but everyone we saw was okay. And so at that point, I started to get the feeling, I said, okay, thinking through my mental list of who I knew had stayed, I think we're gonna be okay, And when we talked to the gentleman at the hotel and saw the people in the house that had been in water over their heads and had survived, I knew it was going to be rough. I mean, it was just so much damage, but I knew our death toll wasn't going to be that high because, people were starting to emerge. Of course, at that point, we had only gotten to 15th Street. That's only halfway through Mexico Beach. We had no idea what the rest of town looked like yet.
We had no idea how bad the other end of town was.
Yeah. But it started to get dark then, and with the gas leaking, and it was still crazy strong winds, where you can lean into it and it holds you up. We decided we needed to get back. hunker down until morning when it was light and we could see what we were doing. But we saw lights, oh yeah, the fire. So we saw lights down towards Tyndall Air Force Base. So we assumed someone was working their way that way. And then we saw lights down towards this end of town, and we thought, okay, maybe it's another crew coming in. But as we sat there, and looked, we saw an orange glow over on Paradise Shores here, so you could see the outline of the building. And that was the worst feeling. I thought that the gas station next door had exploded. Because we knew, we had been down here, we'd seen how toucans had disintegrated, how, the gas station had been underwater. We didn't know how much damage it had. And we knew our friends had stayed in Paradise Shores. That was our first goal, and we saw it was standing, so we thought they were safe. But when I saw the fire, I knew we couldn't get back there because we'd already lost too many tires. And
if we got back here,
we didn't have enough water. There was nothing we could do. There was no running water. There's only 1,000 gallons in the truck, and that is nothing for a building fire like that. And you can't pull it out of the Gulf. It would ruin
and there was so much debris down there anyway.
And so my hope and my prayer was that you all, if the building were on fire, had seen the flames and had time to get out. That was all I could pray for. And that was the worst feeling in the world.
Because we had a fire truck and we're sitting there.
And then we were helpless.
And people were thinking, you've got a fire truck and you're sitting here, why aren't you going down there? What do you want me to do?
They don't understand the circumstances.
Yeah. What do you want me to do? Stand there and look at it?
Yeah. So by the time we got back to the house where we were staying, which was about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, the Coast Guard helicopter had started to come in, and there were a couple other helicopters. And they kept going over where you could see the glow from the fire. Mm-hmm. And so I said, praise the Lord, they're putting the fire out. They were all just getting video, news crews trying to see what was going on and gawking at the damage.
Nothing. The sound of helicopters, that's the next 5 days.
Yeah, so the next 5 days they were characterized by sound of helicopters overhead and fire alarms. And the most frustrating thing about the helicopters was that they were not coming to help, they were coming to get news footage.
I'm glad you bring that up.
However, the Coast Guard did take out the lady that needed help because...
She didn't have oxygen.
We'll tell the story about Danny.
Oh, the old fire chief. We had gone to bed. Old fire chief showed up where we were and wakes me up and says, hey, I need the fire truck keys. Where'd you come from? How'd you get here?
Just walked right into the house because the doors were open
for...
Because there's no air conditioning and it's beastly hot out. Walks right in the house and stands over us in the bed. Hey, where's the key for the fire truck?
And I'm like, what do you got? He goes, I got a woman, we got to get out of here. Coast Guard's got a helicopter. I'm going to flag him down. We're going to airlift her out. Where did you come from? I drove. I said, from Navarre? He said, yep. I said, do you need help? He goes, no, one of the other firemen walked here. He's with me. We're good. Okay, here's the keys.
Oh, wow.
Then I went back to bed. Then we got woke up again 2 hours later by the Gulf County Sheriff's Office and the National Guard, who had heard that there are VIPs in this house that need to be evacuated and medical needs.
Aww.
And we've learned a lot more about the story since then.
Yeah, we've learned a lot more about the story since then. So we're learning that we need to get out, and I'm like, we're good. Where are you going to bring us? Well, it's not going to be very comfortable. It's going to be more comfortable here, is what he says to me. I said, we're good. Nobody needs to leave. And then we found out from the Coast Guard after the fact that they were
National
Guard, that they were instructed to back up to the door so no one saw who was coming out of that house.
Because they had gotten the call from the governor's office. Thought someone from the governor's office was there. And it was just us.
Oh, no.
Because our city administrator called the governor at 2 a.m. to tell her, I don't know if my city clerk's alive and I can't contact anybody at this house. Can you have someone go check on him? And he calls the National Guard and it's all of a sudden VIPs need to get out. No. We're alive and well. Medical team was with them, the whole...
Mm-hmm.
That's fun.
We're
Because
fine.
the call had gotten out. So when we called from here next to Paradise
3
Shores,
times I got out.
and when we called from, under the tower, they got the message that there were 2 firefighters here and the mayor. And they thought that's all that was left of town, that everyone else was gone. And they got the message that we needed as much help as we could get.
And send it to this address.
Yes, so that also helped.
So that's why I thought they came.
Oh,
No, governor's office.
well,
So.
from all accounts, what I've heard so far, I probably would consider you VIP. We need help with some VIP. I'm
Right.
being silly.
So the next morning, we woke up 7 o'clock whenever the sun came up.
I slept in my car the rest of the night after that.
Yeah, it was so hot and miserable. He did. He went to the car because at least he could turn his air conditioning on in the car. It's about 7 o'clock.
Earl was in the driveway.
Yeah, he had come with.
Chainsaw was way down.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the policemen had come in too with his chainsaw. So those of us that were there kind of gathered together, and everyone had parked outside this house we were staying at and slept in their cars or on the floor or wherever. Kind of became the default command post for the moment. So no, 7 o'clock, the interim fire chief showed up, Sandy Walker. He pulled up to the house because he also knew where we were. And we said, Sandy, how'd you get here? Same thing. He's like, oh, I got through. I
just
drove through. So we all piled in. We drove the fire truck into town.
Not the fire truck. Piled in with him.
Okay. So we drove into town and we stopped. That's when the first time we saw the other end of town. And all I could think as we were driving is, oh my gosh, there's so much work to be done. Where do we even start? I mean, you pull into, again, we had gotten to 15th Street where really most houses were still intact except for the 2 in the road. But when you turned down that way, you just realized everything was obliterated. I mean, all there was piles of boards and stuff. And I mean, there were piles in the middle of 98 where that excavator had to push stuff out of the way just to make a path. Where all it was a single vehicle path
And
through.
sometimes they even went off-road.
Yeah, we had to go through, all around and whatever just to get through because stuff just settled wherever it could.
I cannot imagine.
It was pretty crazy. And, even then, I still had a positive feeling because I knew that end of town, most people didn't live there. Most of them were second homes. Most people had left.
But every one
and
of
we
our
stopped.
fatalities was on that end of town.
It was. So we stopped and we started walking the beach and walking down some of those streets that we had knocked. And that's when we met the gentleman from that family that had stayed and told us, look, we told you we'd be fine. Took everything I had to not punch him, looking at all the devastation around, where the house in front of them
was walking the beach.
only a slab. There was literally nothing left from every house around them. The only reason they survived was because they were up on pilings.
Sounds like with everything in you, you handled it with grace, though. I don't know if I would have. That was awful.
So, yeah, there were the 4 or 5 of us then were walking around, and that's when we were coming up 39th Street. 37th is Pier. Okay, so coming up 38th Street, we saw the photographer going up Surfside, and he was taking pictures from the 2nd story, and that's where the NPR photo came from.
He interviewed me there too, but that never showed up, so that's good. It was a terrible interview.
Yeah.
Well, yours is going to show up on this one.
Yeah. So after we finished our walk, we came back to Pier Road, and that's when the convoy of search and rescue arrived.
That's when you cried.
Well, we were standing there for a while and seeing car after car and truck after truck, and they all said Louisiana Task Force 2 or South Florida Task Force 2. And it hit me. I was like, oh, first of all, we had no idea where these people were coming from. We didn't realize all the stuff that happens behind the scenes where, they were told on standby and blah, blah, blah. And they rolled in, and it hit me. I was like, these task force, they have been through Louisiana, had been through Katrina, and South Florida had been through millions of hurricanes, but specifically, most recently, Irma and Maria. So these people knew and understood what we were going through and what would happen next. And I just started to cry because from their pain and their experience, they had come to help us move forward. And that...
They were super efficient.
Yes, and super, like, they were so trained and ready, and they knew exactly what they were doing. But the fact that other people cared about us and knew what was going to happen, it was just so overwhelming to know that we weren't alone. And to remember we weren't the first ones to go through this. Like, yeah, it happened to this area, but again, it's not the first time this has happened.
And not the last time.
Unfortunately.
Well, that's the whole reason of this project, is you're now a part of the voices, and that's, I'm hoping that we won't see who it helps or where it lands, but when other people are navigating their recovery and they're rising up out of it, they run across your experiences and kind of go, hey, okay, so I'm not alone in that feeling, or I'm not alone in that experience, and so I'm really glad you guys came out.
Yeah.
So we're coming
Absolutely.
up on the year anniversary. How would you say your year has been? I know with Mexico Beach in particular, taking as hard of a hit as it did, I honestly don't even know how to ask the correct question on the scale that you guys have been going through rebuild-wise. How would you represent the year?
Well, we're probably the only people you'll talk to that say we'd stay again.
I would stay through another storm given the same circumstances, even if it's another Category 5, if we have the same place to go. However, I don't think I could ever go through another rebuild.
No.
Not in the same positions.
And you're not the only one that feels that way.
Right.
Not at all.
So, you know, so the second day, Friday, other help started to show up. That's when the other roads had been somewhat cleared. We went to City Hall and made that the command center instead. And it was amazing the number of people who just showed up, like people from Georgia who had vacationed here their whole life, just loaded up a trailer and a truck and drove down.
And drop stuff off?
And just stuff started coming from nowhere. Like, we had no idea. Again, we're so detached. We have no cell phone, no media, no nothing, no power, whatever. Like, you had to learn how to write notes for people and, like, tell people where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing so you can be found. Like, I felt like I was back in the 90s. And, you know, just making decisions and just doing what you had to do. Like, it was amazing to see people who used to hate each other just hug each other, just being so glad to see you're alive.
The 2 weeks following the storm were the best 2 weeks since the storm.
Yeah, that immediate hero thing. And just, again, seeing people come out of nowhere with that help. Because, you know, there were people who had nothing except what they had on their back, because everything had been washed away. I mean, there was a gentleman who needed medicine who unfortunately sat on the roadside after search and rescue. I mean, he sat there for 12 hours waiting for a ride out of town. We had one gentleman who all he had was his 2 dogs and the clothes on his back, because everything, half of his house had blown away, everything else had blown away around him. How he survived, Lord only knows. But he sat outside City Hall waiting for a ride. Someone took him home that night to their house, one of the city workers. And then the next day, finally we figured out all he needed was a ride to the edge of town, and someone would pick him up and take him somewhere. So just, that is my biggest complaint, and I mean, we see this in the Bahamas too, is the lack of transportation. Like, you know, we were blessed here that people could, by the second day, drive into town, but I mean, the same thing happened in Katrina, that, you know, people weren't given rides to evacuate beforehand. And if you don't have a vehicle beforehand, I mean, you can't get out. And after the fact, no one has a vehicle because it was all underwater. So just that lack of transportation. And we were told that the reason we didn't have a medical unit, the reason why we didn't have an ambulance, the reason why we didn't have a bus to transport people out of town was because they thought everyone was dead. So thanks. So if you were just barely alive, you wouldn't have made it because there were no services. Thankfully, no one was that much on the edge. But
Goodness.
yeah, that lack of, granted, everyone should be responsible for themselves. And if you have the ability to leave, leave. But not everyone has that ability. Not everyone has that transportation capability, even just to get inland a little bit, because we're so isolated here. Like if you live in Panama City, you may be able to walk to a shelter, but here it's just so far to get anywhere. And the closest shelter was Honeyville, which is 40 minutes drive from here. Same thing other way, 40 minutes to Panama City. So that was a frustration that I would like to see rectified in the future. But
and that's all you can do is learn from each experience like this. So you never know what kind of resources with your experience you'll bring to the table in the future, saying, hey, this is what we need to do before the storm. However, we need to get it funded and happened. Let's start now. I mean, you have that experience now for the foresight. Hopefully you never have to use it.
But
You have it.
So I was going somewhere with that.
It's the year after we're going.
Well,
I think I rushed her a little bit. Yeah, I think I rushed the story onto recovery versus, because there's so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, those first couple of days, it was so touching to see everyone from out of town chipping in, like donations coming from all kinds of places, people driving in just with their truckloads of stuff to help us. But as the days went on, I started to get mad at everyone that came from out of town because we had a crew, incident command, we had people from FEMA start to show up, people from the state, they all came in and they set up their little portable office and they're like, yeah, we're here to help, blah, blah, blah. But they left in 1 to 2 weeks. And I knew they were leaving. And I knew that they got to go back to their life as normal and we would never get to do that. And that made me so mad. Like, how dare you come and tell us what we're supposed to do when you don't have to stay and live through it? Now, of course, and I realized we really needed them. But even now, I go through phases from my work with Catholic Charities where we love our volunteers. We love them so much. We couldn't do our work without them. But I am constantly jealous and a little bit, there's always that friction where yes, you gave a week or a month of your time, but you do get to go back to your life.
I'm glad you bring that up because that is probably something a lot of people are feeling. They may not, want to express it or know how to express it or are struggling with that feeling, and to know they're not alone. I really appreciate you sharing that feeling. It's human nature to feel that way. Yeah. Completely natural.
And so as a case manager for Catholic Charities, I don't have a Southern accent. I don't look Southern. So a lot of people think I just came here after the storm. So, most times I leave it be. There's no need for them to know what I've been through, what I've lived through. It's okay for them to take out their frustration on me and be like, oh, well, you don't know what I'm going through. And that's perfectly fine because I understand. They don't need to hear my story. And, there are times, having been here, and we have countless friends that literally all they have is a slab and whatever little they took that day when they evacuated. Again, thankfully, most of them did evacuate. We hear people in Panama City, like someone I knew, he's like, oh yes, our office was destroyed. Even my own coworkers say that about our office. And I say, no, we cannot say that. Our office was not destroyed. Our office was severely damaged. Our real estate office that had water through the false ceiling, well over 10 feet deep, that's destroyed. Or other offices here in town where there's, the roof on top of some other building, that's destroyed. And people who say, oh, I've lost everything. You have a car full and a storage unit full of stuff. I'm sorry. You don't know what losing everything is until you're the one coming back to your empty lot and finding only a pocket knife and an earring.
With a backpack on your shoulder.
That is losing everything. Mm-hmm. Where we have friends where they had sandbagged up the door. The only thing left from their house were the sandbags and the slab.
That's it.
That is losing everything. So I'm very careful with my terms now. Our office Catholic Charities office was severely damaged.
Like that.
A lot of these homes are severely damaged. Unless, yes, you
But
know.
you have something to work with
Exactly.
to get back.
I mean, it's a whole different story than having just a slab.
And we did finally get to go look at our house after 2 days, and it was fine.
Yeah, that was the second time I cried. I got to our house, I saw there were 2 trees on top of the house. I walked around and said, oh my gosh, of course, trees are gonna be through, there's gonna be water everywhere, whatever. I looked and I almost climbed up the tree to make sure, but they were just laying on top of it. And I went inside and there was no water inside, no damage. And I cried. And then I said, man, I was looking forward to remodeling the house.
I like your sense of humor. I like it. You gotta have it to get through something like this.
Yeah.
Full storm for me is, I made it till May, and then I had enough and had to turn in my notice. I couldn't do it anymore.
I can't imagine.
Working at the city.
Physically or mentally?
Mentally. And physically. Well, mentally. Mentally couldn't do it anymore.
I cannot imagine what it would be like to be in charge of a community or, part of the team that's in charge of the community post-disaster of this scale, when you're not only worrying about your own rebuild, your own family, your own mental health, your own emotional coping, and also be in charge of the community's healing, recovery, rebuild, and everything that comes with that. That is such an enormous responsibility I cannot even imagine.
Well, the doctor told me I stayed too long, so. But
Yeah.
It probably took a lot of courage to admit you to taking a step back. Sometimes we need to.
Gotta go.
And that is not an easy decision to make, but if you made it for your well-being, then that's the only decision you should have made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's always hard to step away from a job because you worry if the next person will be able to do as good of a job. And when the stakes are this high, it's even harder. But the only reason you agreed was because you knew your body and your health couldn't take it anymore.
And that was a very strong choice to make. It took a lot of strength to make that choice. I have no doubt.
Took a while.
Yeah. So my first 2 months after the storm were spent doing, hodgepodge things. I had kind of a role as a volunteer with the city until politics took over, and helped at the feeding site, Happy Tummies, if you've heard about that. That was our beacon of hope. So, like Adrian said, the first 2 weeks after were, you have this hero high, and you see the chart of recovery that talks about that. And Happy Tummies was that spot. This restaurant owner from St. Simon's Island started an online fundraising campaign. He came down with an RV to live out of, and a refrigerator truck and a trailer full of supplies. And he set up like a mobile restaurant and fed everyone for free for 45 days. They set it up, again, restaurant style. It's not just like...
Old buffet style.
Yeah, well, but... there were other distribution sites where you walk up and you get a to-go box to take out, or people were driving around giving out to-go boxes of food. But this, you actually filled your plate, you sat down, there was
People served you.
music playing.
They scooped for you.
Yeah, there was music playing. He would put the game on because he had cable and internet from his RV, and there were lights strung up, and you would sit and socialize with people. Like, you're all day running hectic, doing crazy things, doing everything you can just to kind of make life a little bit better and get things on track for recovery. But you could actually, at Happy Tummies, sit down and take a minute and drink a beer and watch the game and kind of, for a minute, forget about all the chaos and have some fellowship. And that's where we saw a lot of people that we didn't know how they were. So we saw some people from church that Adrian knew from around town, and you would check in and be like, okay, how is your house? What do you need?
That's your greeting for the first month.
How's your house? That was the greeting. And even now, if it's someone who you haven't seen in a long time, how's your house? How's your life? What's going on? And one day we went to Port St. Joe to CVS, which was like a whole nother world. But I saw someone who had been not even a really regular customer, but had come several times to Castaways. It was a young couple, and we just kind of, whenever they came, we would sit and chat. And I saw them, and I was just so overjoyed to see that they were okay and that they were still there, that I just gave them a hug and started chatting, even though we didn't remember each other's names, but you recognized each other. And I mean, for months, that's how it was. Like, you would, yeah, anyone you saw, it was just always such a relief to see that someone was okay.
Well, we're coming up on a year anniversary, and just driving through here today to get over here to do this interview with you guys. I come over every now and then for a cup of coffee at Caribbean's Coffee. There's a little shout out right there. So glad they're still serving coffee.
Best coffee shop.
Yeah, gotta give them a shout out. We come over here quite often to get a cup of coffee from Dave, and I mean, I've seen it slowly start to put itself back together, but it's still so much work to be done. Obviously, you guys are still swimming through it daily. It sounds like Mexico Beach is in good hands with you two as part of the community, though. A lot of work to do, but I'm a little less worried speaking to you guys today.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful you guys came out to speak today. Is there anything before the interview wraps up? Do you want to highlight? Anything you want to say before the camera's off and you're like, man, I wanted to say that?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the year, you talked about, it's hard dealing with your own recovery and your own mental health and whatnot while you're serving the community. And we both are in positions that, so much of our energy is spent on helping others that we don't think about ourselves so much. Yeah, I went through real ups and downs, especially going back to work for Catholic Charities, because I was every day going into people's homes that were damaged to assess what was needed for their recovery and to take pictures and to document and whatever, and to hear everyone's story. That was so overwhelming. It took me a long time to learn how to take care of myself while I did that. That being said, this past week was the first time in probably 6 months I had a really, really bad day. Just seeing October in writing, like every time I fill out a form and have to put 10, whatever, it just is such a shock, and like even the last week of September, I went to buy milk and the date said 10/9. It gave me a mini panic attack. Just those little things. And now, like this week, starting to see on people's Facebook feeds, oh, remember we were tracking the storm. It wasn't until after Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas that I could finally go back and look at footage, because I could look at theirs and see how much worse it was, that I could finally look at our photos. Until then, I could not even look at a photo. It would give me a mini panic attack. But yeah, I thought I had come to a good spot. I could finally look at footage. I could watch videos. I could look at pictures. I could talk about it. And then last week, we went into a client's home who is honestly worse off than after the storm. Because after the storm, she had people that would pick her up and take her to a medical unit for her medical attention. She had people that would drop by and bring food. She had, hope. And there were people coming by and things like that. And then suddenly in the last 6 months, everything had dropped off. And her housing was only getting worse because the mold is developing. The cockroaches have taken over. And she had honestly lost all hope for anything getting better. And the house was in foreclosure. I mean, it was just everything that she thought would be resolved by a year had only gotten worse. And I mean, every day in my work, I'm still finding people that are that way, that are honestly worse off now than right after the storm, because services have dropped away. And they think they're out of options. So I know that, a lot of the federal money and state money is just coming out in January. So I know there's stuff coming, and I know life will get better. But in the meantime, people are still suffering so much. And it's really the lack of hope, and that she was embarrassed to have anyone come into the house because she knew how bad it was. But that was what had kept her from getting help, because she wouldn't tell anyone how bad her living situation was. So it was that moment when after seeing that client, I went back to my house, into the office. That was the first time I had cried at work, because it was just so overwhelming. All these people that need so much help still a year out. And their situations are only getting worse until they get some help. And I imagine myself still living in that kind of misery a year later. That's what broke my heart, is that we still don't have enough help. We don't have enough programs. And people still don't know where to go for help. You know, she didn't have internet. She was in a better neighborhood, so there weren't people coming door to door. And she had no transportation, so she couldn't even get out to go find the help. And that was what really hurt me, is that, you know, she had been let down by so many different places. Things could have been done different to make her life better. And I felt like part of that because I hadn't been out there sooner to see her. And then the cherry on top of it all was that someone from the federal government said, why hasn't something been done for her sooner? And made me feel like I was to blame.
Girl.
So that is what I want to tell people, is that if you are suffering, there is help out there. Please reach out. Even if it's not immediate, you know, just to get connected with the right programs. And for everyone out there, like, we got in touch with a volunteer group that had been here in the couple weeks after the storm and said, oh, will you please come back and do more tree removal? They said, what? There's still trees to be taken down? I said, yes. Every day I talk to someone else that has trees down in their yard, or even on top of their house. Yeah. So that's what everyone thinks, oh, they're fine, they've moved on, things are fine. And my grocery store just reopened. Like, again, like, this lady has been living without air conditioning and with cockroaches and with bad plumbing for a year.
I'm really glad you bring that to the table. I'm really glad, because first of all, your voice on the front of this is what we can do better on, as far as trying to get the resources where they need to go. But not only that, but encouraging people to find the courage to ask for help. And that even if you don't know where to start, there are people that can help you find where to start, that can coordinate it for you. They may not be the one that will give you the assistance, but someone such as yourself can help that person find assistance, know where to start. And thank you for sharing that. I think that's very, very important for people to be exposed to.
And at this point, I mean, everyone's just so tired. I know it's hard when you've been living in those kinds of conditions. You don't have the energy to go out and do it. And it's absolutely not her fault. You know, somewhere along the line, whoever was picking her up for medical care should have referred her to a long-term plan. And that's something else that needs to be done better, is better coordination between those immediate responses, all those people that come in, which we need desperately, but they need to network and connect people to the long-term agencies that are going to be there and pick up the slack and make sure that she really gets the long-term medical attention and whatnot that she needed. And that, I see a huge disconnect there, where all these groups, same thing, that tree removal group that had come in, they came and they just went door to door and did their thing, but they didn't connect with anyone to make sure that, you know, that older gentleman who had a tree through his roof is going to be referred to a home repair program. You know, they didn't keep in touch with us and be like, hey, when can we come back? You know, because everyone just has such a short-term memory if you're not from here. And honestly, I know so many people who live here who their house is fine and their life is back to normal. They don't even realize how some people are still suffering. So, yes, you know, just don't forget. Yeah.
This project is all about bringing a voice to that and awareness to that. And that's exactly what this project is for. So hopefully, I don't know how far it'll get. Hopefully it lands where it needs to land. We won't see who it helps, but, you know, maybe if it gets to where it needs to get, it gives that one person courage to go, I'm not the only one not asking for help. maybe I should be the one to ask for help and be an example for my neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And then it sounds like on your front, maybe you might be a part of a task force in the future, guys.
She's on planning.
You've learned a lot. You are obviously analyzing what you have learned, and you are looking at where the misconnects are, what could be done better, and it's going to take minds like yours to give that feedback. If you're not the one doing it, give that feedback to the assistance programs that are doing that so that they can do better for more storms as they come in, and disasters of this scale.
Yeah, and yeah, just as the survivors are getting tired too, us local responders are getting so tired. And so that kind of care for the caregiver is really important. And when you come in from the outside, just because you've only been here a week and see that this case is an obvious case for attention, you don't see the 150 cases that I've already dealt with and pointed in the right direction and gotten their lives back on track. So, be patient with us caregivers who have been here, especially, every local you meet, you don't know their story. Just like those clients I have who assume I'm from out of town, they don't know my story, and that's okay. I can take that. But from other service providers, you need to
have a little compassion.
Yes, and be patient. And
I like it. That's a really good message.
Yeah, ask, how are you doing? And, thankfully, at my agency that I work for, normally, as staff, we're not eligible to receive services. But in this situation, they understand that we can't help others until we're stable as well. And so they've been flexible to allow us, if we need our own help, you have to take care of. Of course, we don't want to be the first ones on the list. And we're obviously at this point, we're not, because you have to put others first. But, the day that a group came and took the trees out of our yard, I just sighed a huge sigh of relief, because our neighbors, whose houses were fine, didn't understand why 3 months later we still had tree trunks in our yard.
Yeah.
Again, there's still, a year later, there are people with trees on their houses.
Yeah.
And with more mold than ever before, and more leaks than ever before. And sorry, I could go on forever about this, but again,
and honestly, like I said, I do these interviews and I tell people all the time, ranging from like 20 minutes to an hour. Even on the longer end of the interviews, that's the tip of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. It's not even getting anywhere close to being the amount of time needed to really garner a sense of what you have been through. And but in the little bit of time that we're able to speak, I think you did a fantastic job of articulating this journey that you guys have been through. So, and I know it was hard, but I really do appreciate what you've spoken about today. And I realize, and hope everyone watching realizes, it's not even touching it. Mm-hmm. But you did an amazing job trying to. I think there's so many messages that you brought to the table today. Literally, I say this in the interview all the time. I'm glad you brought that to the table. I've never had a table in front of me. So I'm glad you guys brought that to the table. We have a table right here. But thank you two. Thank you so much for coming out and speaking with us today. I hope your recoveries continue to blossom better than they have leading up to this, and continue to move forward as best as possible.
Just gotta get this guy healthy.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah.